Ever wondered what the Republican Party is really all about? Beyond all the typical slogans and sound bites.
It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day political battles.
Exactly. But today, we're doing a deep dive into the heart of the Republican Party.
You're going beyond the surface.
Right, really exploring their core values, how their identity has shifted over time.
Because they weren't always who they are today.
Exactly. And what makes them tick in today's world.
It's fascinating stuff. And we're starting with, well, I think it's fascinating, at least, their Wikipedia page.
Wikipedia, the go-to for, well, almost everything.
Hey, it's a treasure trove when you take a closer look. Gives us a good overview of their journey, so to speak.
Okay, so spill the tea. What'd you dig up? Did you find anything interesting?
Oh, absolutely. For starters, did you realize the Republican Party is one of the oldest political parties, on the whole planet?
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Founded all the way back in 1854. 1854! That's, almost 170 years ago? These guys have seen a lot of history.
Wow, they've been around since before the Civil War.
Exactly. Think about all the changes since then. But here's the real kicker. What they stand for. Their core beliefs. They've transformed dramatically over the years. I mean, dramatically.
Okay, so they weren't always fighting over, tax cuts and healthcare.
No, not even close. Picture the mid-19th century. The nation is on the brink of being torn apart over the issue of slavery, and the Republican Party, they emerge as a direct response to this. They were staunchly against the expansion of slavery.
Wow, so they were like the progressives of their time, fighting
Yeah.
for social justice.
You could say that, yeah. Their platform, early on, it was really grounded in this idea of classical liberalism, right? An emphasis on individual liberty, freedom, and minimal government interference.
Less government, more freedom. That has a nice ring to it, even today.
Right. And it's an idea that resonates across the political spectrum, even today. But, and this is where it gets interesting, as we move into the 20th century, the Wikipedia article, it paints this picture of the Republican Party becoming increasingly aligned with business interests.
Okay, so shifting from, social causes to more economic ones?
Yeah, you start to see this rise of fiscal conservatism, advocating for controlled government spending, less intervention in the market. And this is key. What we now recognize as social conservatism starts to take hold.
So from being anti-slavery to aligning with business and traditional values, that is quite a journey.
It really is. And it reflects, I think, the larger societal shifts happening during that time, industrialization, economic ups and downs, the Cold War, all of these things played a part in shaping how the Republican Party saw themselves, their identity. They become the party of, quote unquote, traditional values, finding common ground with a lot of religious groups, especially the Christian right.
It's fascinating how history shapes a party's trajectory, how it evolves. But I think when people hear Republican Party today, they often imagine this really homogenous group, everyone with the same beliefs, same views.
Yeah, it's the image a lot of people have.
But you mentioned all these different factions like libertarians, neoconservatives, the Tea Party movement. It's like its own little political world within the party.
And you hit the nail on the head there. They aren't monolithic, not by a long shot. There's a whole spectrum of viewpoints within the party.
So how do we make sense of all these different viewpoints within the Republican Party?
Well, that's where our next source comes in, the political compass. But don't worry, you don't need a PhD in political science to get it.
Because I definitely don't have one.
It's actually pretty straightforward. Think of it like a visual tool.
Okay, like a map.
Exactly. But instead of countries, we're mapping out political beliefs. And there are two main axes, right? One, measuring economic left versus right.
Got it. More government intervention versus less, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the other, it measures social authoritarian versus libertarian views.
Okay, so how much control the government should have on social issues. Got it. So where does the Republican Party in general land on this map if we were to plot them?
Generally speaking, they fall on the right side of that economic axis, favoring free markets, lower taxes, things like that, and they tend to lean more towards the authoritarian side when it comes to social issues.
So economically conservative and more on the socially conservative side as well.
You got it. But, and this is important to remember, even within that quadrant, there's a lot of variation. It's not as clear-cut as it might seem.
Okay, so we've got our political compass, our roadmap to understanding different ideologies. And you're saying the Republican Party, they don't all fit neatly in one spot, right?
Exactly. Even though they tend to lean towards the right economically and socially, you'll find folks all over that map, especially when you look within the party.
So give me some examples. Who are these Republicans that don't quite fit the mold?
Well, Take some Republicans who align with the Tea Party or libertarian wings, for example. They often lean more towards the socially libertarian side of things.
Yeah.
They might be all for legalizing marijuana or advocate for a less interventionist foreign policy, less involvement in other countries' affairs.
So even within the same party, you have these different schools of thought, different approaches. I like it. It's not as simple as slapping a label on everyone saying, all Republicans believe this.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so important to understand these nuances. It helps us really grasp the dynamics within the party, the internal debates, the power struggles.
Oh, I bet there are a lot of those. So it's not just about different policy ideas. It's about how those ideas clash within the party itself.
Exactly. And it's fascinating, really, because in many ways, these internal dynamics within the Republican Party, they actually mirror the larger political landscape as a whole.
It's like we're looking at a microcosm of American politics.
Exactly. But let's shift gears for a second. We've talked about the nuances, the different factions, but what about the big picture? What are the defining issues for the Republican Party today? What keeps them up at night, politically speaking?
Yeah, what are their top priorities?
Well, if we look back at the Wikipedia excerpt, a few key themes emerge. And the economy, unsurprisingly, is always front and center.
Makes sense. It's usually a top issue for both parties.
Right. But Republicans, they consistently champion those free market principles. They advocate for limited government interference in business and often propose tax cuts as a way to, in their view, fuel economic growth.
Right. Less government, more individual freedom in the marketplace. It goes back to that classical liberal ideology we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And it ties into their historical association with business interests and fiscal conservatism. You'll often hear the term trickle-down economics in this context.
Oh, trickle-down economics. I hear that phrase thrown around a lot, but to be honest, I'm not always sure I understand what it really means.
Well, the basic idea is that if you provide tax benefits to businesses and wealthier individuals, it'll stimulate the economy, and those benefits will eventually trickle down to everyone else.
Okay, so the idea is that a rising tide lifts all boats.
Right. But there's a lot of debate among economists about whether that actually happens in practice. Some argue that it leads to increased investment and job creation, which benefits everyone, but others say it mainly benefits the wealthy, exacerbating income inequality. It's a prime example of how economic policy is about more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about values, about different visions for how society should work.
It's like choosing your own economic adventure, different paths, potentially different destinations. But it's clear that the economy, it's a major issue for Republicans, regardless of which approach they support. Now, what about some of those other hot-button issues? I know the Wikipedia article also mentioned gun rights.
Absolutely. The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, it's a cornerstone of their platform. They generally stand opposed to stricter gun control measures, arguing that they infringe on individual liberty.
So again, that emphasis on individual freedom really shines through there.
For sure. And this idea of individual liberty, it also plays a role in their stance on social issues like abortion. Republicans tend to hold more conservative views on abortion, advocating for stricter regulations and limitations.
And what about immigration? It seems like that's been a particularly contentious issue, especially in recent years.
Yeah, immigration is a big one. And it's complex, triggers a lot of debate. Generally, Republicans favor tighter border control and stricter immigration policies. They often argue it's crucial for national security and for protecting American jobs.
Right, so it intersects with economic anxieties as well.
Exactly. And it highlights how these political issues, they're rarely isolated. They intertwine with these broader questions, about the role of government, individual rights.
Okay, so we've unpacked the Republican Party's core values, their changing identity over the years, and some of those key issues driving their current agenda. But this is where I think it's important to bring it back to the listener. Why should they care? How does all of this connect to their daily lives?
You're right. It's about making it relevant because the Republican Party's stances on these issues, they have real-world implications. These aren't just abstract ideas debated in some far-off political arena, right?
No, these debates impact people's lives in tangible ways.
Exactly. Take their stance on tax cuts, for example. Depending on how those policies are designed, it could impact your own personal tax burden, how much you pay in taxes, or their views on healthcare. That could directly affect your access to affordable, quality medical care, their approach to education. It could shape your children's schooling and immigration. Well, their policies there could even influence the social and cultural fabric of your community, the places you live and work.
It's a good reminder that politics isn't this distant thing that doesn't matter, that it's about the real-world choices that affect us all. All right, so for the final part of our deep dive into the Republican Party, let's bring back that political compass.
Our trusty roadmap of political beliefs.
Exactly. Because remember how we were talking about how the Republican Party doesn't always fit neatly into one spot on that compass?
Right, right. Even though they tend towards the right, there's all those different factions within the party.
And you mentioned something really interesting, something about how the Republican Party's position on that compass, it's been shifting, like it's been moving further right in recent years.
Yeah, it's something you can see hints of in the Wikipedia article, and political analysts have been talking about it too, this kind of rightward drift.
Rightward drift.
Yeah.
So if their platform is becoming more conservative, what does that mean for the average Republican voter? Like, what about those who maybe hold more moderate views, more centrist views?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because it gets to the heart of representation and party unity.
Like, are they being left behind as the party shifts?
Exactly. If the party as a whole keeps leaning further right, it makes you wonder, is there still room for those more diverse viewpoints? Or are moderates feeling like they don't have a home anymore?
It's almost like the party itself is going through an identity crisis,
Yeah.
trying to balance its history with where it's headed. So what do you think? Will this shift make the Republican Party more unified? Or will it cause even more division, more factions?
Honestly, it's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely something to watch. As you learn more about the Republican Party, pay attention to how these internal tensions play out. How are they dealing with these changes, these different viewpoints?
Because they're internal struggles. They often tell us something about the bigger picture.
Right. Exactly. And as we head into future elections, seeing how these dynamics impact their strategies, their success, well, it'll be fascinating. It's a good reminder that politics are constantly evolving, responding to the world around us.
Well said. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from their beginnings to their changing values, the key issues, that political compass.
Yeah.
But this is just the start, right? It's an invitation to keep digging.
Absolutely. Keep asking those questions, keep learning. Don't be afraid to think critically about everything.
Because that's what this is all about, right?
It is.
It's about diving deep, getting curious, and forming your own opinions. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll catch you on the flip side.